So tonight I might talk about some things that sound like financial advice, which they're financial guidelines, right, from the financial advisors of the authors, but I myself am not a financial advisor, so that's just my legal statement there. All right, last week we talked about the three mindsets. Spender. One thing I did differently this week is you can't really tell. You might be able to tell. You might see underlines on some of the text. The underlines are actually the answers to the fill-ins. So if you see something underlined and you're trying to track down whether you're looking at the fill-ins, they correlate to make it easier. So if you're looking, you got all the pages, or let's see, you should see question 1 would be the first beginning of the fill-in. Yeah. All right, so three mindsets we talked about last week. Spender. Most people, right, are spenders. Spenders pursue the greatest possible consumption, even though we're aware that we need to save. Right, saver mindset. Then we have spender mindset. Then we have the saver mindset. Saver mindset strive to limit consumption to some extent. They're focused on accumulation. And then we have the servant mindset. The more rare mindset orients their life around limiting both consumption and wealth building, right? Focused on giving the most money they can towards blessing other people. I could do a handout, Tiff. One more. Craig, you need a handout? You got one? Okay. One over there. All right, so last week, I went over this chart last week, so I just want to go over it again for those that might have missed last week, just the tactical elements, and those that are online watching. So again, this diagram shows how a servant's views the difficult decision of allocating financial resources, right, and how they view the world. All the servants that were studied, Christian business people, all Christian servants who gave money away, this is how they viewed the world. Each zone represents a possible state that you're in for a given servant. Right? And so the bottom row, the x-axis, whether you're in the left column or the right column, is answering, are spending needs met? So if a servant feels their family's legitimate needs and healthy desires are not being fully met by their income, then they fall on the left-hand side, which says, I could use more income. Right? If you feel you're well provided for and your income is plentiful, then you fall in the right column, I make plenty of income. Now, on the y-axis, the vertical, so whether you're in the top row or the bottom row, right? If your family has a mortgage to pay, retirement to save for, etc., you probably feel that you could use some more wealth. So then you would be on the bottom row. You could use some more wealth, you could use some more savings, more net worth. If you have all your wealth needs met, all your saving needs taken care of, then you have plenty of wealth, which is the top row. So zone 1 represents a situation in which the servant mindset has a need for more income and wealth. Right? Most of us are in this zone. Most people are in this zone. Giving and saving is both fundamentally important to strive, and you strive for a bit of each. Give some, save some. Right? But this requires some effort and planning to be successful. Zone 2, this is where income is sufficient. We have enough income coming in, but we still need more wealth and more savings. And so wealth building is needed. And so we want to balance giving with and saving, giving with saving in this zone. So we want to give a lot, save a lot. That's zone 2. Plenty of income, not enough wealth or savings piled up. Zone 3, this is where a high wealth person with low income. This could be a wealthy retiree. This could be an entrepreneur who just sold his business, has a lot of liquid capital in the bank, but no longer has an income or little to no income. So they have plenty of wealth, but they could use some more income, and that would be zone 3. Zone 4 is the ultimate goal. This is where all your financial needs are met. You have plenty of income, you have plenty of wealth. This is now where there's no need to save, right? And so this is where you can start radically giving. Right? Zone 3 is also not a need for saving, because zone 3 is you don't need to save anymore, so you're going to be giving away a lot to the kingdom. Now, zone 1 is where most people start and live. And there's plenty of servant mindsets that live and stay in zone 1 their whole life. Right? A spender will typically not reach zone 4 because they never think, I make plenty of income. That's not a thought that typically comes to the mind of a spender. And a saver never reaches zone 4 because they typically will never think, or they'll always think, I could use more wealth. Right? Saver is always just trying to save more and save more and save more. Right? And so with those two mindsets, it's really hard to reach zone 4. Now, again, some servants live in zone 1 their whole life. There's nothing wrong with that. You could be living in zone 4 your whole life. You're giving 5, 10, 15% of your income. That might, over time, be more than someone in zone 4 giving 50% away. Right? So there's nothing wrong with being in zone 4. We don't want to judge anybody based on where they are. But the mindset is to eventually get to zone 4 if possible. So that's kind of a recap from last week. This is the first tactical thing to think about. What zone are you in? Right? And then how do we get to the other zones? That's what the rest of the books and the chapter talks about. So chapter 6, spending, investing in the present. Ecclesiastes 8:15. So God commanded enjoyment because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat, drink, and enjoy himself. For this will accompany him in his labor during the days of his life that God gives him under the sun. All right, so we're looking at S. The first S is spending. Scripture doesn't condemn spending outright. Right? We all need to use money for daily life. The key question is, do we spend as servants of Christ, or are we spending enslaved to consumer culture? Right? And always buying the next thing and trying to increase our toys or what have you. Ecclesiastes 8:15 commands joy in the present. God gives us good things to enjoy, but enjoyment must be rooted in stewardship and not greed. Right? We'll explore what it looks like to spend wisely, but we want to make sure we're founded in stewardship and not greed when it comes to spending. So there's a term I'll use called life-giving that the book kind of goes over. Life-giving, you'll hear that term being used. Life-giving is spending money used in ways that honor God, strengthening relationships, and support your calling rather than fueling status, impulse, or excess. Right? So life-giving is spending money in ways that honor God, strengthen your relationships, your calling, and your support. Your calling being what it is you do to help the kingdom, and not fueling status, impulse, or excess. So there's a case study of Brett and Christy Samuels in the book. And this case study is Brett left a six-figure high consulting job to pursue a startup. So they left a high-income job, and their income plummeted to about half. And instead of panic, they prayed. So he went to a startup. They prayed and created a life-giving budget, right, based on what we just talked about. And they cut their spending in half and eliminated luxuries and discovered joy that was untouched. And it's an interesting case study in the book. It's like they cut a lot of their luxuries out, their spending got cut in half, and they still found that their joy and their happiness was not touched. Right? The wife, Chrissy, says it best, it's not about happiness, it's about holiness. Right? Cutting excess revealed how little they needed. They shifted from a scarcity mindset, right, we're always out of stuff, we always need more, to an abundance mindset of thinking we have plenty, and trusting God rather than consumption. All right, so again, life-giving. Spending money is in a way that honor God, strengthen relationships, support your calling, but not in fueling status, impulse, or excess. We'll talk more about that. So the Samuels teach us three things. One, spending more doesn't make us happier. Right? Spending is not happiness. There's an underline under happiness, so that's one of the answers. Two, a scarcity, it leads to you don't want a scarcity mindset. You want an abundance mindset. So reducing consumption can move us from that fear, that scarcity fear, to the trust and abundance fear. Right? When we reduce some of that consumption, then we're relying more on God even. And three, God cares more about holiness than material comfort. Right? Their lifestyle change freed them to enjoy what mattered most without being chained to having to go to Target all the time or luxuries and make purchases. I looked at you by accident. Spending and parenting, right? Later, the Samuels, they had a daughter, right? Expenses rose with childcare, but their mindset stayed the same, right? They refused to to wrap their child in wealth, and they kept their lifestyle the same other than the expenses they had to incur. And they recognized that their child is more the Lord's than it was theirs. And research shows that raising a kid in a balanced middle-class environment often leads to healthier outcomes. Excessive wealth doesn't guarantee well-being. Intentional spending is what guarantees the well-being. It's how you spend the money, not necessarily what you're accumulating. If we go back to the rich fool, right, the parable of Jesus and the rich fool, right? Jesus' parable of the rich fool warns us that building bigger barns or bigger portfolios cannot secure our future. True security is in God. Likewise, the spender mindset is like the thorny soil in the parable of the sower, right? Distracted by riches and not being fruitful or being unfruitful, right? So the servant spender asks, does his purchase glorify God? Not what do the Joneses have, right? But does his purchase glorify God? And that's a mind shift that took me a while to, I'm still not there 100%, but even me personally, it's I think about when I go to buy something, and I'm like, is this going to help God in any way? Is it just for me and for me alone? And so it just makes me think about when I go to purchase something, like, do I really need this? Maybe I do, right? Does this purchase glorify God? Then it helps at least with that spending mentality that I typically will have. So Abraham Maslow is a 20th century psychologist, and he proposed something called the hierarchy of needs. It's a framework for suggesting how people pursue their needs in layers. And so in the framework, there's a physiological need that people have. This is the first layer they will spend or their wealth towards or try to pursue. And this is stuff like food, shelter, healthcare, some basic needs in that sense. After they've acquired or been satisfied in this layer, then people move into the next layer, safety. This is stability, emergency funds, insurance, and things like that. Then people pursue love and belonging. This is family, community, hospitality, relationships. Then they pursue esteem, more education, more skills, more meaningful work, and then self-actualization. This is purpose, growth, generosity, and service. At lower incomes, most dollars go to level 1 and 2, the basic needs of food, shelter, healthcare, stability, right? Physiological needs and your safety needs, right? As your income grows or the margin grows of what you bring in, right, your spending should emphasize relationships, growth, and purpose without getting into the status spending, which is what you get near the end. This is called it's called super development. You're spending a lot on your status, right? You're spending on trying to just yourself. It's all about you and all about your status and growing that, versus spending it on, we want to focus on relationships, growth, and purpose, levels 3 through 5. And so we have to be mindful on how we decide to spend our money, right? Spending follows these stages of, first, it's need or survival, right, to that physiological and security needs or safety needs. Then stability. Then we focus on dignity and finally flourishing, right? But if it's unchecked and we don't pray, we don't seek God and align ourselves, right, then we move into the super development, which is status spending, endless accumulation of things that don't really mean anything. John Paul II warned that possessions must serve being and not pride, right? Existing but not being prideful on how we spend. Money should support our calling and our relationships and not signal our status. So some practical tools or practical things to consider, right, to get here. Define what's life-giving in your budget, right, and pray over it. We're working on this now, right, trying to figure out what that is, right? But what's your life budget and pray over it, and we'll get more specifics here in a second. So one, define your life-giving budget. How much is it you need for your family needs and healthy desires over the course of a year? Right, what's that spending cap look like? Second, create a cut list. This is a cut list is keep a list of potential budget cuts. Keep a list of things that you could cut if you had to. This will make cutting hurt less when you need to do it because you kind of already expect it, right? So one of the things on our cutting list might be, for example, our Netflix subscription. It's not something we really need, something we have, but it's on the list of if we had to cut it, we could. Right? We also have a Sling subscription. It's like a streaming TV. Another thing on our cut list that we could cut, I don't really need it. It's convenient, but it's not necessarily a need. Right? So we have things on our cut list that these are the things we could cut if needed, if things come up. And then the research shows that spending on experiences helps people bring more lasting joy than buying stuff. You'll see some of this online as well. It's that it's more beneficial to save up to go on a vacation with your family than it is to buy them toys or things throughout the year. Right? They don't remember, especially with kids, they don't remember the things you buy them. Right? They play with it, and we've seen this. They never see it again for months. They find it under their bed, and suddenly, oh yeah, they forgot about that toy. But we could have thrown that away, and they would have no. I do that sometimes when they go out of town. I'm like throwing stuff in the trash when the kids aren't there. But they remember vacations. Sometimes we go up to the mountains usually once a year, so we'll be going in a couple of weeks. But they remember that still from a couple years ago. Like they remember experiences, and that's what research shows. Spending on experiences brings more lasting joy, right? Not stuff. Right? And if you remember from the previous weeks, right? Then it's how do we bring God joy in that, right? As a family, we go somewhere, and then we'll do a devotion with the kids. Not that we couldn't do it at home, but they tend to remember because it's an experience outside the house. It's something a little bit different. So pray over your life-giving budget. Keep a cut list of things that you could potentially cut from your budget, and spend on experiences more than things. So setting a finish line, right? Capping the lifestyle and redirecting the excess. So here's the idea. The idea is to set a spending finish line, right? Research suggests that 100 to 150K per year sustains flourishing your needs. Now, that was in 2016. It's about 35% increase, I think, because of inflation. So, somewhere maybe between 135 to 200K. But it's not about the number. It's about figuring out what amount we can cap our annual spending at and be comfortable and at least be flourishing. Right? So research shows somewhere between 100 and 150K based on 2016. Beyond that, doesn't add any more happiness or any more holiness. Right? Spending beyond that doesn't add any more happiness to your life. So there are many Christians that cap their salaries. Rich Mullins, may be familiar, successful Christian singer and songwriter in the 1990s. Lived on an average income, gave the rest away. All right, we have Alan Barnhart. He's mentioned in the book, too, a couple times. He's the CEO of Crane and Rigging, Barnhart Crane and Rigging. He has a fixed salary, and the business makes millions a year. He has a fixed salary for the family, and then the rest goes to God's kingdom. Right? He has more of a challenge of how to give it away. He's to the point where he's giving it to, envelopes and cars in the parking lot, right? And so he's even challenged of how to give away so much. And then Rick Warren, you may be familiar with Rick Warren. He's a pastor, author of The Purpose-Driven Life. You may have read or not, right? He kind of came up with the reverse tithe of live on 10%, give 90%. But when he sold his book, he made a lot of money, and it all went back to the kingdom. Right? So there's a lot of Christian leaders that have drawn the line and said, this is all we need. The rest goes back to the kingdom. So servant mindset in action, right? Blurring this spending and serving. So servant mindsets, typically you'll see that spending blurs with buying and blessing if you're providing a service. So you might host a youth group at your house. You might hire a friend who needs work. You might choose a community building over a luxury item. You might purchase a book or a Bible, a Christian book or a Bible for a friend of yours. Right? That would be blurring the line between spending and serving. Right? And in a servant mindset, and that's something we're trying to do is like we like to spend money. So how do we spend money helping others instead of spending money for things for ourselves? Right? To blur that thinking together. And sometimes you won't know if you're spending or giving, right? And that's okay because that if your money draws you closer to God and others, then you're likely doing it right. Right? So if you're not sure if you're spending or giving, that's a gray area. Think about if this action draws you or someone you know closer to God. So some takeaways on spending. Spend with intention, right? Servant spending isn't about legalism or rules or being deprived, right? It's about joyful restraint, freedom from consumerism, and a margin for generosity, like meaning have income or wealth to be able to give away and have generosity. Spend with intention. Be mindful of how you spend. Does this purpose help God's kingdom or what I'm about to purchase? Live beneath your means. Right? That way you can still give to the kingdom. Set the finish line. How much a year do we need to live off of? Right? Set the line, and then everything else goes to the kingdom. And redirect all access to the kingdom. And again, that's something we're working on as well. It's like and the number changes, which we'll talk about, because it might be you have some bills or debts you got to pay, and you work towards paying those things off, and then maybe you lower your finish line. Like we have one finish line we're working with, which includes paying off the things we need to pay, but then we have another finish line we think we can come down to once those things are paid off. So saving, investing in the future. How a servant, think about a servant of Jesus thinks about the future. How a servant of Jesus thinks about the future. Scripture holds kind of a balance between don't worry, seek his kingdom, right, in Luke 12. And be discerning, don't toil to acquire wealth. So we just not to worry, seek his kingdom, but also, we're going to have to toil and work and labor to bring in wealth, but not, abundant wealth, right? Just the right amount in essence. Saving has a valid place. We should be saving, but not an exalted one, right? We have the responsibility of saving while guarding our heights from idolatry, right? The question isn't should Christians save, but how much, for what, and with what heart. Right? So we're not saying don't save money, right? There is an amount we would want to save towards, which we'll go through some of the numbers here. But it's about how much do we save, for what purpose are we saving, and with what heart are we saving? Like saving for, sometimes we don't live by water now, but I used to say like saving for a boat, and then, I don't really need a boat, but it's like it'd be nice to have a boat, but, that the saving for a boat goal is not really going to help me or any purpose for God unless I give it to the church or something, if I buy and give it to the church. But think about what we're saving for. So the servant framework, save with purpose, right? Save with purpose. As servants, we attach savings to tangible goals, not just we're saving because we need more stuff, or we're saving just because, saving for a rainy day. What are we saving towards? So the book framework suggests create a goal for why you're saving. There could be multiple goals for why you're saving, but you're saving for X, maybe it's retirement, you're saving for kids' college, you're saving for your emergency funds. Those are all acceptable things you'd want to save for. And then once you've hit all your goals, then why else are you saving? The excess should go to the kingdom. So save with purpose, save for a reason. What's the goal we're trying to achieve? Keep it open-handed, and by that means be prepared to redirect at any time based on the needs of the kingdom, right? If an emergency comes up in the kingdom of the church, right, be prepared that God might want you to redirect at some point. And weigh every dollar, right? Weigh every dollar and versus are we giving this dollar away or are we saving this dollar? So again, I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm going to be talking about some financial things here, but just again as a legal footnote there. All right, so what should savings cover? Savings should cover freedom from debt, right? Freedom from debt. We should be covering emergency funds. Right? Savings should be covering your transportation, however you get around town. Home, right? Mortgages, things we need to pay off. Savings should cover our retirements, right? So that late life work gap, where you can't work and you're living off the wealth. And kids' education, right? So these are the basics. These are the basics of most families. Yours might be slightly different, right? But most families face these basics. The idea is to have prudent provision and save but so that we're not a burden to others, right? We have enough to kind of support ourselves. And then shift, once we've hit all these goals, if we saved enough, then shift to incremental dollars towards generosity, right? Beyond this, we'll talk about luxuries, right? But these would be the basics that you would want to cover or prepare for. So some tactics, debt and emergency fund, right? And you see some of this in the Dave Ramsey course, if you've taken that or you go to the Dave Ramsey course, is pay off your consumer debt. Pay off your credit card, your student loans, your auto payments, right? This crushes your ability to be able to give as much because you're having to pay all these debt items off. Prioritize paying off aggressively, right? But still giving regularly. Don't drop your generosity down to zero, right? And just like the Dave Ramsey, right? You could start an avalanche. If you're paying one card off, then use that payment to pay the next card off, use those two payments to pay the next card off, and slowly pay off that debt. And then go for an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months, right? Based on the Harvard, and again, these two authors, remember, are graduates of Harvard Business School. So this research is coming from the Harvard Business School and biblically based as well. But they're suggesting, I've always heard 3 months for savings, emergency funds. They're suggesting 3 to 6 months of expenses. So that would be one of your saving goals. How do we get to 3 to 6 months worth of expenses? That way you can absorb shocks, job loss, medical issues, roof issues, without derailing your giving or your generosity. Some practical guidelines, right? Try to target no balance on your credit cards, to what we're kind of just talking about. Use some type of automation to pay a little more towards your card so you don't have to worry about it. It just happens automatically if you're doing some type of bill pay, right? And your emergency funds, don't put them in, keep them in liquid format, not an investment account where you have to take the money out, but maybe in a high yield savings account. And review your habits. Where is your money going? Right? What are you spending on? What are you saving? Are you still paying cash for cars? Right? Could you buy a car cash? You want to get to the point where you can pay for a car cash or quickly pay it off. Do you have enough in the emergency funds? Do we need to save towards that? Are we still giving? Because you still want to give, but you might be in zone 1. Give a little, save a little. Right? And then meet monthly to do the course corrections, right? As you start to maybe go off, slightly off the rails. So now the house talks about housing prices and what kind of house you should afford. One of the authors was looking into buying a house, and so they brought that to the Lord too and kind of looked into that and the recommendations around that. And so housing, right? The recommendation was, housing can quickly crowd out your generosity because of the mortgage payment. There's a lot that goes into a house. And so conservative numbers was take 20%, 8% of your income. That should be what you pay for a house, right? Your monthly payment. So whatever your monthly income is, 28% of that, your payment shouldn't be more than that or around that. So I think that's if you're making $100,000 a year, that would be about $8,300 a month, and 28% of that would be around $2,300. Your house should be somewhere between 3 to 4 times your income. So again, if you're making $100,000 a year, that house should be somewhere between $300,000 to $400,000, right? Ideally. And then if you want to do the see how much you can afford question, right? See how much you can afford question based on 15-year mortgage, and assume 80% of your income. And what this allows is to give you that room so that you can still give, right, to the kingdom. So 80% income off $100K would be about $1,800 a month. You don't have to remember these numbers, obviously. It's more about, the structure of the framework here. We're looking at maybe, God willing, in the next year or so, building a house across the street. And we've been tying it to this, right? The formula here is 3 to 4 times the income. What's that put us at a limit? And then payment amount per month, not going over this amount. And, I could see that in a previous place we lived, right, where the mortgage takes up a big chunk of your income. It's like all your money's going to that, and then you don't have any money to live generously or save towards other spending goals that you might have. So retirement, right? You want enough for late life, but it's not your life's mission. right? Enough for late life, but not your life's mission. You should save consistently. It's 15% a year. Right? Retirement savings is wise, but it's not our identity. Aim for steady contributions that go into your retirement, typically around 15% across all the accounts. Right? Always try to get your employer match if you're working and you have an employer match and your 401k or Roth or traditional. Right? Always match that. Aim to have the modest amount of security when work is no longer possible. Right? Not to retire at 45 just because, but if your projections show that you're ahead of pace, then slow down maybe and redirect some of that to generosity now instead of later. Kids, education, 529s. Education is a stewardship goal, right? We want to educate our kids. That's being a steward of God's resources and wealth. But we want to set realistic targets for the children and adjust based on scholarships and aid. So avoid over-accumulating, thanks. Avoid over-accumulating for the kids while starving generosity. Right? You want to find just that right balance to let them, for the kids to provide for their education, but don't over supply it, I should say. And let the kids see how you give. Let them join you in your generosity. Show them sponsored children that you've sponsored. Show them sponsored letters from children. Visit, places that you provide generosity to, whether it's like Metropolitan Ministries or something along those lines. This shapes their heart than an oversized, bank account or investment account. So beyond the basics, financial independence. A lot of us want financial independence. I would like financial independence, right? It sounds virtuous, but why? Why do we want financial independence? We should be asking ourselves, is it just for security? Because if it's just for security, then we have to be careful that we don't drift towards the rich fool, building bigger barns and bigger portfolios for more security, right? A servant can cap their upper wealth. So the recommendation in the book, right, is that look at your annual spending. When you draw that finish line, 33 times your annual spending should be your capped wealth or savings or net worth. So if you're making $100,000 a year, or if you need to live off, if $100,000 a year is enough to live off of, 33 times that would be around 3.3 million, I believe. Right, and that would be your net cap for net worth. Anything beyond that is excess and should be chopped off and given to the kingdom. Right? History and math both suggest social return of giving often beats financial returns and forms better hearts. Right? Once your saving reaches 33 times your annual spending, right, you've reached financial independence. Right? That's plenty to cover your needs for life. Right? The author suggests that we don't need to keep piling up wealth past this point because now we're doing with the rich fool. We're accumulating a bunch of wealth that's going to be put in a barn or a portfolio. Instead, redirect it towards the kingdom. This ceiling guards us from becoming like the rich fool. Right? This ceiling guards us from the downsides of having lots of wealth or accumulating lots of wealth. Right? Set a finish line for your savings overall, your net worth. That's the 33 times. And set your finish line for how much you need a year to spend and live off of. That's your spending line. And so now, the idea is to have our wealth finish lines, the minimum to the maximum. So at a minimum, right, we want to create two lines. The floor, this is what we truly need to fund our basics. This is covering our debt, our home, modest home, emergency funds, retirement savings. Typically, based on the research, this can be done with $1 million or less in 2016, so maybe 1.3 in 2025, right? But it's context dependent, right? Needs change per person based on where you are and what your needs are. So that's the minimum. How much wealth do I reasonably need to meet basic needs? Housing, education, kids, retirement, security, etc. This is called the basics. Then, what's your ceiling maximum? Right? How much wealth is too much? Right? Beyond which further accumulation shift towards from stewardship to now hoarding. Right? So they suggest no more than 33% of your annual spending finish line. The ceiling is your maximum wealth target. Revisit this annually with a trusted believer, right? The book that, the Allen CEO has an accountability partner with his wealth. And am I spending it in the right place? When he wants to make a large purchase, he actually runs it by an accountability partner that's part of the church. Do we give more now? Save a bit more? What's God prompting us? Right? Anything beyond that is considered excess, and we can use that to fuel the kingdom rather than grow our barns. Right? And in between the floor and the ceiling is where most of us live. Right? Deciding whether each dollar should go to savings or each dollar should go to giving. Right? The principle is about not about hitting a precise number. Right? The principle is about living with intentional finish lines so that money doesn't silently take over our hearts. That's the idea. Right? Whatever that finish line is for you, your minimum to your maximum, and staying between those lines. Pray about it and then set what you think it should be. Inheritance. So inheritance and business equity. When it comes to inheritance, right, more isn't always better. History shows that large fortunes are often weaken later generations. Right? Wealth passed down can often weaken rather than strengthen faith across generations. Typically, by the third or fourth generation, wealth starts to cause an entitlement, pride, or apathy type of character. And we've talked about this too. It's like, how much do we leave for our kids? I think I saw, who's a Family Feud guy? Steve Harvey. I think he was doing an interview, and he said he's spending it all. He's like, I don't spend it all. It's going to be nothing for my kids. I think left for the kids, right? That's their problem to get the job. And because he's right, they'll start getting that entitlement mentality that they're owed it. Instead, we should be working towards provide early essentials. So help them out with college, help them out with their first house maybe, things to get them started in life, but avoid leaving massive windfalls. Right? Our greater legacy should be a life of generosity and faith to them. Some Christian families pay for college and a modest early life gift, and then direct the rest of the kingdom giving. For business owners, right, it's the same thing. Right? The same principles apply. Whether you keep or give away your equity, remember it all belongs to God. Owning a company with large assets can be a faithful stewardship, right, if viewed as God's and not yours. Right? Alan Bernhardt, the CEO I kind of mentioned, he's talked about in the book, he gave away $250 million into a trust for God's kingdom. Right? Others retain the ownership of that, and they commit to giving away 90% of the profits each year. Right? So a business can be used as a tool for mission, not a trophy for wealth building. And just like we mentioned earlier, right, a lot of faithful leaders have capped their personal lifestyles and used the rest for God's income. The question is, are we holding our wealth loosely enough that God could direct it at any time? Insurance as a stewardship tool. Right? The authors talk about how insurance shouldn't be about maximizing wealth, but about protecting against loss, so that we don't become a burden to others. Protecting our loved ones so we can live more freely, generously, without fear of financial ruin. Right? So we can, life-term insurance is enough to cover typically for dependents. Disability covers for loss of income. Right? Health typically protects against catastrophic cost. Right? But the idea is to buy the insurance to cover risk, but not trying to build up our wealth even more. Now, there's a test. How do we know if we're going in the right direction or if we need a course correction or a calibration? So there's a calibration test where you can ask yourself, if you had 20% increased income, right, so wherever you are today, if your income increased by 20%, ask yourself, if it increased by 20%, what would you spend it on? What would you add and why? What would you spend it on and why? If your 20% decreased by 20%, right, what would you cut and why? Right? So if your 20% increase and you think it only, and the things you think about only add status, luxury, or luxury, that's a yellow flag. All right, it might be that we already have enough and should be possibly going to the kingdom. So 20% increase, for example, I would say for us, right, that would go to paying off debt, paying off bills, paying off things so that we can generously give more as that cash flow increases. If a 20% decrease, and you look at what would you cut, only cuts off fluff, right, then you might be a little inflated with what you think your needs are. Right, so you realize, okay, 20% decrease, this is what we would cut, and you realize you don't really need that anyway. Right, that might be an indicator that, it could be possibly be cut. And so re-aim for life-giving, right? Re-aim to realign your spending based on your calling, your relationships, hospitality, and so that you can still continue to save and to give. So decision flow. Can you see that? I think so. So every month, the idea in the book is that every month you revisit your spending and your savings and your giving, and you ask the questions: do we cover the needs that are met with restraint? Are our needs covered, with wisely spending or healthy desires? Give with joy. Are we giving with joy? Save towards a named goal. To named goals, meaning don't just save to save. What's the purpose of why we're saving? Is it for emergency funds? Is it for college education? But give your savings different goals to achieve. Check against finish lines, right? Check against your spending finish line. Are you on track? Are you over? Are you under? Right? Do we need to adjust that? Check against your ceiling line. And then pray and adjust. Right? Go through that, pray and adjust. This rhythm keeps us from defaulting to the save everything now and give later trap that the scripture warns about. All right, so every month, check if your needs are covered, give with joy, save towards a goal, and then check against your spending line and your finish line, and then pray and adjust. So you'll have to create that spending line and that finish line. So things to think about, right, over the next week, right? Which saving goal could use more clarity? Right? Are you saving towards something and you're not really sure what? Could we clarify that in some way? Could you clarify that? Where might worry be driving more savings above faith? Worried about something that may or may never happen? Maybe there's insurance to cover it, possibly. Are we saving for worry or fear, right? And that's more important than our faith. And then think of one step to reduce your lifestyle inflation this month. What's one thing you could cut out to lower that lifestyle? Right. For us, it may be Netflix, but we'll see. So action steps, right? This is how to figure out your finish line. Ideally, if you can, before the next section, obviously this is just for you and for your personal use, write basic finish lines. Write the basic finish lines. What's the debt we need? What's the debt? I put debit, it should be debt. What's the debt, right, we need to cover? What's the emergency funds we need to create? Right? Write your basic targets for debt, emergency funds, car, home, retirement, education. Figure out what your spending line is. Right? Where is the spending line that we need to cover those things? Right? Where is it today? Now, later, when you pay the debt off, you could maybe lower that finish line, spending finish line. But where is it today based on meeting those needs? Then try to automate something into your emergency funds. Even if it's just $50 a month, automation, even if it's just $25 a month, something to go towards your emergency funds. And then schedule a generosity conversation with your household, right? And let's talk about where should we be giving, or where should our giving grow now and not someday? Where is a place that we can give now and not someday? And that are the tactical steps for chapter 6 and 7. Any questions? And so one thing I might ask is there anything that stood out to you today or anything you felt challenged about? What's that? Oh, spending with intentionality? Yeah. That takes practice. Yeah, be intentional about what you're doing, yes. Yeah, anything that stood out to you, anything you felt challenged, where you felt challenged about money? Yeah. You get all the answers? Which one? Oh, trying to save? Yeah. How about anyone want to try what's one practical change you can make in the next week? Ours is probably cutting Netflix because we heard some bad things about Netflix today, so it's a good time to cut it out probably. Or anything you found that challenged you about money? Or anything that stood out to you? The life-giving budget?
Yeah.
That just stood out to you? Yeah. So again, this is the tactical steps, right? This is probably the heart of the book. Figure out your spending line for the year. Figure out your wealth cap for your life. And figure out what those are, and then anything beyond that is excess. Right? And that's what led me down to finding this a couple years back, because a couple years back, I had almost like a triple increase in income, maybe a double increase in income. And if I had drawn the line back then, right, we would have kept our lifestyle, and the rest would have went to the kingdom. But that's not what happened, because we didn't have that line. It was like, oh, we got more money, we'll buy more things, right? And looking back, I'm not really sure I can really point to anything that benefited from the extra income, right? That income went away, right, the following year, back to normal. But looking back, it's like, what do we have to show for that money, the extra money that came in? Double income, nothing. I don't think I can point to one thing that, that maybe a new graphics card for my computer. Like, there was not much I can point to that, like, this extra income led to whatever. When it should have been, we didn't need that extra income. We were living on the same income for years prior. And then it's like, we get more income, and it's like, you just inflate it up, and you start inflating your lifestyle. And that's the goal, right? It's to not do that. So hopefully God blesses us again with some other opportunity to, as we figure out our spending line, and then now we know it's, okay, anything beyond that, we give back to the kingdom. And that's it. That completes week 4. Craig.
I like what you said about vacations.
Yeah, vacations.
I grew up in a large family, and so every year we would go to my uncle's place and spend on the lake. Well, we outgrew this house and we started to have to rent a house and
Yeah.
spend a little bit more. We decided it was better to do that. And if you talk to my kids, they look forward to that every year.
Yeah.
And now they've all been married, they bring new grandkids. It's just that big event for the year that we
Yeah.
invest in them. And like you said about devotions with your kids, each family takes a night to do devotions
Oh, that's neat.
worship.
Yeah.
And it's just memorable every year. And it's that investment we made in that.
Yeah.
It's more than just gave us,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Those experiences. We have a friend of ours. They have 2 kids, and they always offer to tell their kid, "We'll buy you a birthday gift, or we'll go on a vacation or experience." And they always pick the experience, and it's what you remember. You don't remember the toys, you don't remember the gifts, and so we're trying to do that with our kids as well. But they're young; they don't get it necessarily right now. Like, we want this toy, and it's like we're saving towards that. But yeah. The research shows the experiences are more lasting, and like you said, do a devotional, do something different, still geared towards God's benefit and kingdom. All right, so we're done a little bit early. Next week will probably be the last session for this book. Chapter 8, we'll talk about the tactical elements around the servant mindset, and then a lot of the closing out and some summary stuff. That'll be next week and the last week for the God and Money program. And then in 2 weeks, the 22nd, I'm not sure if it'll be here or where it'll be here, but we'll be doing apologetics. So that's more one of my hobbies. This is not my hobby. This was something I was forced into based on circumstances of the past, and I had to learn it for myself. Apologetics is something is actually more of a hobby. That's proving God through science and logic. As Christians, we have faith where we know God is real, we know Jesus is real, we have personal experiences. But oftentimes in the world, people ask questions that we can't answer. How do you know Jesus really resurrected? How do you know God created the universe? How do you know God even exists? How does evolution tie into Christianity? How, origin of life type questions. Proving God through cosmological argument, proving God through the theological argument, through design. And so those are the things we'll start covering over between, I think, October 22nd to sometime in December. And that's it. We're done.